Hello, and welcome to the 83rd in an unknown number of podcasts. You may have seen a recent news article claiming that NASA had interfered with and changed the star signs. This caused some panic and mild horror, particularly as some people were discovering that because of these changes they were no longer an Aquarius and were now suddenly a Pisces. Had all of their horoscopes up until that time altered? Are their characteristics now suddenly different? It's since come out that what NASA were actually talking about in an article was something called axial precession. Basically, the Earth wobbles as it rotates, and so, as Professor Brian Cox would say, the stars in the night sky that we see right now, may 3,000 years ago, be completely in a different place. It also mentioned in the article that the Babylonians tried to fit 13 constellations into 12 months, and seeing that they couldn't do that, they just got rid of one of those constellations. But the fact that a news report caused some mild horror, particularly when it's about predicting people's characteristics or their futures, led me to think about other things that we use in order to do that. Who amongst us hasn't heard of people gazing into crystal balls, or even trying to determine your futures and your fates by looking at the lines in the palm of your hand? Some people have talked about being able to have the power to read the tea leaves at the bottom of your teacup. And there was a time when people thought that because of the bumps in your head, you could feel around and be able to predict certain characteristics that you had, and therefore the kind of life that you would lead. Writers have done this too. George Orwell famously set out his vision of the future in his novel 1984. And then there are the prophecies of Nostradamus. Nostradamus was a 16th century astrologer and physician, and he was said to be able to predict the future by writing what were called poetic quatrains, basically some poems consisting of 4 lines, where he's trying to predict what life in the future would be like. This idea of being able to predict the future is something that we're familiar with. If you've seen the film Groundhog Day, well, it's not just the film. Genuinely, there's a place in Pennsylvania called Punxsutawney where they do look at or ask the groundhog, as you can see photographed, has he seen his shadow or not? And it's been an indicator as to whether or not winter would last for another 6 weeks on February the 2nd, which is Groundhog Day, or not. And who amongst us doesn't know the saying, red sky at night, shepherd's delight, red sky in the morning, shepherd's warning? Now, instead of relying on a groundhog once a year to determine whether or not winter continues for another 6 weeks or not, or to observe the sky and to see the colours and try to decide whether or not we're in for a good day tomorrow or not, we tune into a weather forecast. I'm sure many of you, like me, have watched Owain give us some information about the weather for our region. This sort of thing is important to us. We may have a barbecue planned and we don't want to organise it for a day when it's going to rain. We might decide we want to go for a walk and we'd love to be able to get outside and walk on a bright sunny day and not when it's grey, cold, miserable and raining. Some people, however, would just say that weather prediction is a much simpler affair than watching somebody talk about atmospheric pressures. And as you can see here, the weather forecasting stone can just very easily give you a visual description of what's going on. And indeed, there's the famous quote from Billy Connolly. There's no such thing as bad weather, only the wrong clothes. It matters not to be predicting the weather and finding out what the weather's going to be like. You just have to be prepared and plan ahead and have the right clothing with you. We'll come back to planning in a moment. But I want to turn our thoughts back to predicting the future. Doris Day famously sang, "Que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see, que sera, sera." And so it's pointless trying to decide the future because it's uncertain, it's unknown. We can't try and predict what will happen. It's not for us to determine. There's no use in reading tea leaves or feeling the bumps in our heads or gazing into a crystal ball. These are things which are beyond our worry in a way. We should focus on the here and the now. And in a way, there's a modern interpretation of this by Edward Monckton. Don't know if you're familiar with his work, but here is something that he calls the Zen dog. So here's the Zen dog. He knows not where he's going, for the ocean will decide. It's not the destination, it's the glory of the ride. Further example there of living in the now, living in the moment and enjoying what is happening right now, not worrying too much about the future. But with a few days left of this academic year and with 6 weeks holiday in front of us, our thoughts obviously will turn to September, and they will turn to what school will be like. And in the words of Winston Churchill, he who fails to plan is planning to fail. So worry not about September. I'm sure that you will be getting lots of emails and letters highlighting what's going to be happening in terms of year groups and bubbles and what the plans are for moving around the school building and so on. I'm sure also that you'll be getting regular updates on YouTube. Those of you who've been on there may have already seen the virtual tours, particularly for students who are going to join us in Year 7 and students who are currently in Year 7 and will be making their way up onto the Bexton Road site in Year 8. So if you've not seen those, I urge you to log into YouTube and take a look at those so you can have an idea as to what to expect when we come back in September. Now, ultimately, how we approach life is a happy mix of the two. Sometimes it's important to live in the now and to experience those moments as they happen and not worry about things that have happened in the past or to concern ourselves with things in the future that haven't happened yet. But equally, sometimes it's important to plan and to have some form of an idea as to where you're going, what you're going to do. That said, plans don't always go to plan. Sometimes things go wrong, but that's fine too, because as we can see, if plan A didn't work, keep your cool. The alphabet has 25 more letters. Until tomorrow, as ever, be kind, take care, and stay safe.